The gender wage gap, not real. The gender earnings gap, that's real. Often what happens in this conversation is that people misconstrue, albeit on purpose or because they're just not that smart, wages and earnings. Wages. If you take a man and a woman in the same job, it is very likely they will get paid the exact same thing. Actually, as they get younger, women make more money. It's complicated. When it comes to wages, there is an overall around 3 to 7% wage gap. Many people believe this may be due to not asking for raises. But in terms of what they call the wage gap, where they're like, for every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 77 cents. That's actually the earnings gap. And that has to do with things that are not related to specific jobs. It also has to do with the fact that, according to this study, check it out, more than 2/3 of women who are on home duties with higher education do not want to return to the workforce, says new survey. What this means is, if I'm going to make an assumption here. My general understanding is that many women will take time off work, take care of their family. When they do that, 66+% do not want to go back to work. This means a man and a woman who have the same job, even if it's a petroleum engineer, woman leaves to stay home, doesn't want to come back, her earnings drop to 0. That's going to negatively impact the average. You can then look at women and say, these women have college degrees, these men have college degrees, but why are the women's earnings overall so low? Because many don't want to come back to work. But let's read what they have to say. They say, more than 2/3 of women who work in the home and have a third-level education do not want to return to a paid job, according to a survey issued today. This is actually from yesterday. In research conducted by Solis on 218,000 women on home duties not participating in the labor force and aged between 20 and 64, the majority of women, regardless of their education level, said they did not wish to return to the labor force. Solis is the Further Education and Training Authority in Ireland, an agency of the Department of Education and Skills set up in 2013. So we'll do a pause here and say, this is Ireland specific, and this story is from the Independent, the Irish Independent. So I'm not familiar with Irish news, but I did do a quick search and found that the Irish Independent has been around since 1905, so doesn't necessarily mean they're good at what they do, but they've been around for a long time, so they're doing something right. They say, the survey found that some 122,500 women on home duties have a leaving cert or less. Another 31,700 have further educational training, and some 57,500 have third-level education. According to the data, there are 10,200 or 8% of women with a leaving cert or lower qualification who are available for work but are not seeking work right now, or are seeking work but are not available immediately. This is really interesting stuff. Some 18,000 of the 122,000, 15% women, who are on home duties and have attained a leaving cert qualification at least, do want a job but are not available as they are looking after children or for other personal family reasons. There are 90,800, 74% within this grout who do not want a job. So what we can say right now, according to this data, it looks like we have a survey data showing, at least in Ireland, it's just Ireland, this could be a cultural thing, women don't want to enter the workforce after they've gone on home duties. Now, that's a very traditionalist perspective, but you'll hear it a lot from conservatives. Gavin McInnes went on Fox News a couple years ago and told a woman to her face she would be happier at home. I don't think that's fair or accurate. You can't determine what a woman's going to want. The important thing we need to point out here is individualism versus collectivism. While it's very, very interesting we're seeing this data in Ireland, it doesn't mean that at an individual level a woman's going to be more happy doing one thing or another. And that's why individualism is so important, because there are many women who do want to work. They point out that more than 60% don't want to have a job. That means there's 40% who, at least in some capacity, would be looking to work. That's a lot of people. Even if it's, they say 2/3, so we're looking at 66 plus. Even if that's 30%, 3 in 10 women don't want to be in the home. One of the big issues that I think, well, what I've heard from second wave feminists is that feminism used to be about women should have the opportunity to work. But now it's become women must work. And so it's really flipped. There are still a lot of women who want to be homemakers, who want to be mothers, who don't want to enter the workforce, who don't want to do any of this in the first place, but society is definitely pressuring them to do this. So I guess one of the traditionalist arguments is Many more women. If we look at 66%, that I assume you'll find a lot of people on the more conservative and traditional side saying that makes sense. Most women don't want to do, paternalistic type duties, working, hunting, etc. I'm using hunting metaphorically. They want to do more maternalistic things, more traditional behaviors. You'll find a lot of centrist moderates and right-wing people fall on the side. Now, progressives obviously don't think this is true. I don't know what they think is. It's the idea they say, it's having it all, having a career and raising a family. But I do want to point out a few very obvious things. Regardless of the motivation, the desires of the women, there are a few things that are absolutely true that must be brought up when talking about the gender earnings gap. A man doesn't have the same biological functions as a woman. And I'm using those words to refer to their biological sex. Okay? So people are going to get offended already, whatever. The point is, a man doesn't have to be pregnant. Women can work while they're pregnant, but they can't work to the same capacity as they get, further and further along. Let's say, even if it's walking upstairs and women have to go slower than a man, that's still a tiny, tiny disadvantage. It may not have a big impact, but over time, these things do add up. And then you have to consider the fact that women have to give birth. Like, if you want to have a baby, women have to give birth. We're not looking at biological males doing this, which means when it comes to biological males and biological females, there will always be a work leave period for women who want to have families. It doesn't mean women can't come back to work. It doesn't mean they'll be out forever. But that still is a biological disadvantage. So men will naturally have more time to focus on their careers. One argument I've heard about this is that men should take time off with their wives. And, after the woman, has the kid, then the husband can take off time to take care of the kids. And I actually think most dads would probably agree with that. They would love to have a paternity leave to, raise their kids as well. I think that would be fantastic, actually. I don't necessarily know how we pull something like this off, because I do want to point out one thing I think is missing from the whole argument about, healthcare, increased government programs. And one of the big left-wing arguments is that all jobs should offer paternal leave for both parents. And that's for sure. But I do want to stress, a lot of people on the left don't understand how expensive it is to run a business. And I seriously mean it, especially as I'm trying to get my company up and running and expand. Seriously, look at how much payroll costs. You got to hire a ton of people. You have to hire administrators. It's not super easy. So we don't want to create barriers for businesses to get started, and we don't want to strain small businesses. But I do think we need to figure out how we can get dads to spend more time with their kids, and we can help women get back into work when they choose to, right? Because I think ultimately what we're talking about is choice. If these women choose to stay home, then more power to you, right? If men choose to take off time to go watch, be with their kids, absolutely 100%. And if some men don't, some women don't care. What's interesting here is a lot of the argument, in my opinion, falls to the more extreme sides. People saying women should do this. Women shouldn't do anything. Individuals should do what they feel is right for them. It may be true that society pressures people to do certain things, like it encourages women not to be this. I think there are certainly some women who feel like they will be inadequate in terms of a social perspective if they don't go back to work. And that can be stressful, but I don't think that matters. That's my opinion. All that really matters is if a woman says, I'm going to have a kid and then go to work, I'm like, hey man, yeah, do your thing, don't mind me. So you'll end up with people on the far left saying, oh, this is propaganda, it's nonsense, ignore it, women should be working, women need to be in roles and more jobs, we need to end the gender wage gap. You have websites like Vox recognizing that the earnings gap is specifically about women not working the same hours in the same jobs. So I don't know what their solution is, but there are people on the left who acknowledge that getting men and women the same amount of money requires women to work the same jobs as men. That's why they want women in STEM. And then you have the more, ultra-traditionalist types who are saying it doesn't matter. They think women should only be homemakers. And those are both wrong. The important thing is, as rational, kind of moderate individuals, we recognize, well, here's data, at least in Ireland, showing that many of these women would prefer not to be in the workforce after having a family. We should respect that 100%. But it doesn't make determinations about what the individual will want. And I think that's the biggest thing. I'll put it this way. That's the inherent problem of the culture war. It's individualists versus collectivists. But the collectivists, and there's left and right on the cultural scale. So you have progressives who are saying women need to do this for the sake of all women. And then you have far-right traditional, like on the cultural scale, traditionalism saying women should do this for the greater good of society. And then unfortunately, you get the individualists stuck in the middle who, admittedly, are fairly ignored by the traditionalist right, but targeted by the traditionalist left, because you'll have someone like me saying, I think you should do what you feel like you need to do so long as it is within the law. If you're somebody who wants to stay home and not go to work, like, hey, you have my respect and I respect your dignity and integrity and yada, yada, yada. But the left will say that's opposes our agenda of getting 50% women in this job and 50% women in this job. Because if 60% of women, presumably, at least in Ireland, again, this is just in Ireland, if 66% of women said, we don't want to return to work and they didn't have to, they wouldn't, right? They would do what they want to do. And again, respect their choice to do what they want to do. But that's really, really bad for the progressive agenda that wants to get women in all of these fields at parity, 50%, 50%. I don't know if that'll happen, right? While I can say it over and over again, respect the individual, I want to stress that when you look at nation level statistics, you will find that if 66% of women just don't want to come back to work, a good portion of them will not, and you will not get gender parity. Well, that's bad news for progressives. It's not it is still bad news for the ultra traditionalist types. Because the reason I say ultra or is because I know many people who have traditional values who don't care that women are working. So I mean, it's like literally the cultural revolutionary people and the ultra traditionalist types. It's bad news for them that individuals can do whatever they want. And that's why us individualists are stuck in the middle. And it's also a really good point to be made about how I think conservatives in this country know where to draw a line, because they want to act as individuals and they say it's about respecting the individual, but the fringes do not like that regardless. And so the left can't draw that line because they're a collective, and thus the collective doesn't want people like me who are individualists. The left is abandoning liberalism. It's not absolute, but they are. They're moving towards regressive authoritarianism and non-theistic religion, etc. And so now liberals are being called conservative. It's a weird thing. Interesting data. I'll leave it there. Comment. Let me know what you think. My next video is coming up at 4 p.m. Eastern on my main channel, youtube.com/Timcast. It's a different channel. I will see you there.